welcome to Connected Conversations for Creatives, a place where creatives like you can learn, grow, and connect. I'm your host, Jennifer Carr. Have you ever wondered about the invisible hands behind some of the most influential books of our time? The ones that shape ideas, craft narratives, and even bring to life the stories of leaders and celebrities. Well, today we're diving into that fascinating world, the world of ghostwriting. It's a unique and often misunderstood facet of the literary world. It's a craft that requires not just writing skills, but also the ability to capture someone else's voice and vision. Imagine the challenge of stepping into someone else's shoes, seeing the world through their eyes, and then articulating their thoughts as if they were your own. It's a blend of creativity, empathy, and technical prowess. In recent years, the art of ghostwriting has gained more visibility thanks to in part to celebrities and public figures openly acknowledging their ghostwriters. This transparency has led to a surge in demand, transforming ghostwriting from a niche profession into a booming industry. But what does it take to succeed in this field? How do ghostwriters balance their own creative instincts with the need to faithfully represent their clients' voices? Well, today's episode is going to explore these questions and more. We'll delve into the reasons behind ghostwriting's rise from the shadows and discuss how aspiring writers can break into this rewarding yet challenging field. Whether you're a seasoned writer looking to expand your repertoire or a curious creative eager to learn more about the behind the scenes of book creation, this conversation is for you. Our guest today is someone who has mastered the art of ghostwriting. Dr. Marcia Layton Turner is the daughter of an artist who chose to forge her own path in the creative world. She transitioned from potential painter to professional writer, building a successful business specializing in business book ghostwriting, primarily for CEOs and business owners. Marcia has also completed her doctoral dissertation on the subject of ghostwriting, providing her with unique insights into this evolving industry. So get ready to uncover the secrets of ghostwriting and dive into this conversation to learn how ghostwriters like Marcia bring the stories of leaders, visionaries, and more to life. Marcia, thank you so much for being here and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited. As you're talking about ghostwriting, I was already thinking about, okay, I got to make sure I mention this and, I got to bring up that. So yeah, very excited.
No, it's going to be great. And I am fascinated by the idea of ghostwriting. And I don't know if you remember the old kids TV show. It was on like PBS or PBS Kids, I think, and it was called Ghostwriter. And I was obsessed with that show, but I had no concept of what it really was referring to. Like, what was a ghostwriter until years later? And and so I kind of always wondered, why would somebody want to be a ghostwriter? Why would somebody want to use a ghostwriter? Because I just thought authors wrote for notoriety. So I'm hopeful that as you're telling us about yourself, you kind of answer some of those questions. So if you will, tell us about yourself and how you landed ghostwriter as a job title.
Sure. And I always struggle to be brief in telling my story here because I've been around a while. But I started off my career in corporate communications at Eastman Kodak Company and left to start my own agency. And it kind of has morphed and pivoted through the years, but I was originally a business plan writer. And then I got more into marketing because I missed the creativity. And then I was asked to help technical edit a book, meaning go through it, and that evolved into my sort of co-authoring the book. And so that got me on the path into the group of writers that were helping with the Complete Idiots Guides. So they started feeding me books like, hey, Marcia, do you want to write this book? Do you want to write that one? So I got really good at that format and I was pretty fast. So fast forward a few years, I've been writing these books under my own name. And my agent said, a publisher has a project that I think you would be perfect for. It's a business book. It's already selling really well. They have tons of pre-orders, but the author hasn't written a word and it's 7 months overdue. Could you step in and help him? And I thought, well, I've never worked alongside someone. How does this work? And she explained, well, he's going to ship you these boxes that are organized by chapter. The outline's already been approved. And you just need to talk through each of the chapters and figure out what he wants to say. Okay, sounds doable, right? So that's what we did. And over, I can't remember if it was 6 or 8 weeks, we just almost every day had a conversation about, okay, here's chapter 1. What did you want to say? Why did you want to say it? So I was sort of the interviewer asking the expert the questions that a reader might have. And then I draft it. I would send it to him. We'd have another conversation to edit it. And we got it done. We sent it off, had some minor edits, and then it was done. And I really enjoyed the process of learning with this expert and getting to ask, really detailed questions about, well, why would you do that? Or can you tell me an example? Again, taking sort of the role of the reader. And when we were done, I told my agent, wow, that was fun. I don't know what's that's called, but I want more of that. And she said, that's ghostwriting. Oh, that makes sense, because my name wasn't going anywhere on that book because it wasn't my book. And so once I knew, that's what ghostwriting is. It's working alongside an expert in some topic to help them articulate their message, in addition to helping them structure it, figure out what makes sense to include, what not to include. It was so enjoyable. So then I started sort of marketing myself as a ghostwriter. I reached out to agents and editors that I had worked with at all the major houses saying, hey, if you need anybody, I'm over here, happy to help. And so for the first few years of my ghostwriting career, that's where most of the work came from, was from traditional publishers who had sometimes received manuscripts that weren't exactly what they were expecting, or they realized that in discussions with the author that the author was having trouble. And so again, they would pair us up and say, I think you really need to work with Marcia to get this book done. And as I said, it was just so fun. What I've noticed, though, in the last probably 10 to 15 years, and this goes to your point about ghostwriting really taking off, my business has shifted from 100% coming out of traditional publishers to probably 90% going to the hybrid and independent presses. It's really changed. And through the dissertation that I had to work on, I learned that what happened about 15, even 20 years ago were two major things. One was social media. And suddenly there are experts who are in constant need of content. So there's this just sort of hamster wheel of needing new material. And if you have a day job, it's hard to also keep cranking out all this new information. So that's where ghostwriters, professional writers, were hired to help these experts in coming up with all that content. The other thing that happened was that new printing technology emerged that made it possible for what we call self-published books to look just as good as the traditionally published books. And that had been the problem in the past. What we called vanity presses. The product just wasn't as good. And you could tell right away just by looking at it, this did not make it through a gatekeeper.
Yes.
It's just not very good. But with this new printing technology, they can be right on the shelf side by side and you wouldn't know. So now there's a way for people who may not necessarily meet all the criteria of a traditional publisher in terms of having a certain number of followers, an email list, a long list of speaking engagements. If you don't have that, but you still want to share your message, you can go the hybrid or independent route and come out with a high quality book. So that's really been driving the demand. And it's the reason that I've been busy now for many years working with entrepreneurs, business owners, CEOs, founders, because again, I like to learn from the business people. So it's been great.
So you do mostly or 100% nonfiction. Do you ever dabble in the fiction?
I am 100% nonfiction. I'm really good at taking lots and lots of information and sort of processing it in my head and then figuring out what are the key nuggets that we really need to focus on here. So it's sort of, I'm a good filter, I guess is what it is. But in terms of creativity and just making up stories, that's really hard. I have so much respect for fiction writers because my brain just doesn't go there. Yeah.
No, I love that though. That's because one, I could get probably really addicted to the ghostwriting part of things only because I love research, and that sounds like a constant flow of research because I love learning, and that would be fantastic and amazing. But clearly it requires this unique skill set to be able to capture someone else's voice, their vision, and spit it out sounding like them. So like, how does that process work for you? Do you have to like shift your mind into, okay, I'm now this person and I am embodying this person, or how does that work for you?
That's a key point. I'm so glad you brought it up because some people, so I also run the Association of Ghostwriters, which is a community for professional and aspiring ghostwriters. And many times we get applications for people who want to join and they have no ghostwriting experience, but they've written lots and lots of their own books. And I have to explain them that doesn't necessarily qualify you to be a ghostwriter because writing in your own voice is so different and dare I say easier than having to adopt the voice of someone else. So when I'm ghostwriting, I'm doing a lot of listening in lots of different forms. So when I'm interviewing my client, I'm paying attention to how they speak because how they speak is going to drive then how their voice appears on the page. Are they very careful about the word choice? Is every word precise? Or do they ramble with long run-on sentences and 4 points in one sentence, and it's hard to know where one stops and the other starts? Do they sound like a scholar, or do they sound like somebody who, grew up in a particular community? It's listening for what's the accent, what are the words, what's the pace at which they speak. And then as I'm turning around and coming up with a draft, I am sort of listening in my head to how did they sound? How would they say this? And sometimes before I even start interviewing the client, I'm watching videos of other presentations that they've given at industry talks, or if they do any kind of social media where they're doing reels, I'm paying attention to how do they present themselves. And then that helps me then when I shift into client mode, thinking, okay, how would they say this? And it's much easier. But that really is the biggest challenge because I could write a book on some topic that's my perspective in my voice. But if I had to write that same exact voice or that book in someone else's, it's going to sound so different. So yeah, so it is a lot of research. It is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Because I like the research part of things. I like watching videos and reading articles that they've written, reading other books that they might have contributed to, and just really get a sense of the person and how they communicate.
It sounds like fun. Like people fascinate me. And so like being able to spend time just kind of absorbing a person, that sounds kind of creepy, but at the same time, it's like, I'm absorbing this person so that I can
Right.
become this person so that their work my work sounds
Right.
like them. No, I love that. That is fascinating. And so is there a favorite kind of project that you've worked on that you've gone, I could
Mhm.
write this kind of book all the time, like biography or, statistics, whatever.
There are so many different kinds of books that I enjoy. I think the sweet spot for me is something related to starting or building a business,
Mm.
partly because I've written books on that topic myself. I wrote The Unofficial Guide to Starting a Small Business, to Marketing a Business. I've ghostwritten a ton of books related to growing a business, marketing a business. So when I'm interviewing someone on a book about that, it's it's easier, I
Yeah.
guess, or I already have thoughts. I already have
Yeah.
thoughts. I don't have to really spend a lot of time researching, okay, what are the core issues here? What do startups struggle with? What do they not know? Because I kind of already have a sense of what that is. I'm not going to make assumptions. I'm going to ask the author that, but I already have an idea in my head of what they're going to say. And that also helps because sometimes when they say something I'm not expecting, I know to really drill down on that. Like, oh, everyone else I've heard says A and you're saying B. Tell me more about that. That's really interesting. And sometimes that becomes like the hook of the book because it is so
Yeah.
different from what all the other books say about it. So
Oh my
yeah, so
gosh.
entrepreneurship, startup books, how-to books, I love them because I always come away with something new that I can try in my own business.
Ugh, I love that. And what a good mentality, just a mental shift to have to be like, you know what? I can learn something from doing
Yeah.
this job. And I think
Yeah.
that's something we should strive to do every day anyways, to learn something new, but to just be like, okay. And that's what I love about when I'm writing, because I do write fiction. Nonfiction is one of those things that I wish that I could write because I have things that I would probably like to say, but I really like getting lost in my imagination as well. And
Yeah.
so, but I do learn things about, I found processing emotions and, helping other
Mm.
people process emotions, which is funny because my background is marriage and family counseling. You would think that I would already know how to do that.
Mm.
But when I'm sitting there like pouring it onto the page, I'm like, oh, that is a new way to look at that. And these
Right.
people aren't real, but that's okay.
Right. Right.
Yeah, that's funny. Okay, so what do you think? You know the background of this information because you did a whole doctoral dissertation on it, which is wild. Like that. I love that because I'm thinking I didn't know there was that much to learn about ghostwriting, and so now you are the expert on the matter.
Well, I don't know, John. Let's not go that far. But I started this. I got my MBA right after college. So it's been a long time since I've been in the classroom. And I started to feel about 10 years ago, I started to wonder, am I falling behind in my research skills
Oh,
and in just awareness of all the research that's been done on business? And I wanted to kind of catch up. And so I applied to this DBA program. And I thought this is going to be great because it's going to be a way to just polish my skills, learn about all the new databases that are out there. And I started not really being sure what my dissertation was going to be about. I had some topics I was interested in, like decision making for me is also very interesting. How do people make
yeah.
decisions? And that relates to ghostwriting as well.
Mm-hmm.
How do clients choose? I was curious about that. But I decided it really makes the most sense to look at ghostwriting, in part because during my first semester, one of the first tasks is doing a lit review, a review of all the existing literature that's out there on your proposed topic. And there was one article by two professors on book ghostwriting. Everything else, I mean, there were other articles on and studies of ghostwriting, but it was more about the ethics and
Oh yeah.
academic ghostwriting. There are probably thousands of different journal articles on ghostwriting papers in Australia and what they're doing about it in India. And that wasn't really my interest. So when you put aside all the ethical articles, it was one. And I
Oh my
thought, well,
gosh.
here's an opportunity.
Yeah.
Let me just see. And so I went into it with some assumptions based on working with ghostwriters in the Association of Ghostwriters now since 2010. I thought I know this industry pretty well. And that was so dumb of me. And I quickly realized that I was dumb because the first part of my research was talking to other ghostwriters and asking them questions about how did you get into the business and why ghostwriting
Mm-hmm.
and what kind of clients do you have and what do you charge and what's your process and all that. And I learned that some of what I thought, based on my own experience, that some people are having a similar experience and some people are having a really different experience. What I found most interesting about those conversations was that most people were like me and that they sort of fell into ghostwriting. And that was a term that a lot of people used. I fell into it. I didn't say, oh, I want to become a ghostwriter and I'm now going to proactively go after that kind of work. They had work handed to them and then they realized, oh, this must be ghostwriting. So I thought that was interesting. I think nowadays, more people are aware of it because we're talking so much more about ghostwriting. There are writers who are deciding, for example, newspaper work is really hard to get. I think I'm going to pivot and I'm going to go after ghostwriting. So now I think there is more, a decision to do that. So that was one interesting thing. The other thing was that most people did not have an English degree. Most ghostwriters had experience writing, but they didn't necessarily have a college education or a literature degree, which
Yeah.
is like me. I didn't have an English degree. So very interesting that the people who are writing most of the New York Times bestseller list, they don't necessarily have an English degree. The range that ghostwriters charge for their work is huge.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the people who are at the upper end, people earning 175,000 per book and up, generally are working with major publishers, traditional publishers. The
Mm-hmm.
work that they're getting comes from an agent or an editor that they previously worked with who said, oh, you know what, this would be perfect for Marcia. And then, hey, Marcia, do you want to work on this book? And generally the books are with well-known people or people who have a really large following, so the advance is large enough to cover the cost of the ghostwriter. So I thought that was interesting.
That
The
is.
other interesting information came when I switched, and in my second study, I started talking to clients and trying to find out, again, to the questions about decision making. Well, how did you find your ghostwriter? What were you looking for? And what did you pay? Were you happy with that? And what I found was most people were referred to their ghostwriter. When a business, and most of these people were writing, I think all of them were writing nonfiction actually.
Gotcha.
When they decided that they had an idea for a book and they just didn't know how to get started, and they heard that one of their colleagues had used a ghostwriter, they would turn to them and say, hey, you used a ghostwriter for your book, right? Who was that? Can you give me their name? And then they have a conversation with that person, and overwhelmingly that first person is the person they hire.
Interesting.
Shocking to me.
Yeah.
I thought, because I think as ghostwriters, we spend a lot of time trying to figure out, how do I connect with these people? And we're doing a lot of marketing and promotion to make sure we get our name out there, thinking that if someone comes across us on LinkedIn or, on Facebook or anywhere, that they might be more susceptible to reaching out to us. Not how it's happening in at least the conversations that I had, that they want referrals from people who have worked with you as a ghostwriter, and then they're like half sold. The other major thing that I heard from those clients was ghostwriters are not charging enough.
Ooh.
Again, shocking to me.
Yeah.
So, tell me a little bit more about that. Like, what did you pay? What were you expecting to pay? Why did you think that that was too little? And what I heard was that ghostwriters are just not asking enough. Whatever the ghostwriter asked, they were happy to pay.
Yeah.
But then after going through the process, they can see, wow, that was a lot of work. And like, you didn't charge enough is kind of what was their reaction. Some of them expressed that to their ghostwriter, and some didn't. Yeah. And so we're talking about books that cost anywhere from $40,000 to $60,000.
Yeah.
And these people are saying, that wasn't enough. Because it is, going back over the process, you're researching, you're spending a lot of time interviewing the client as the ghostwriter, you're drafting, you're editing, you're polishing. It's many months of work on average. So I can see why they would say that, but I was surprised because so many of the conversations that ghostwriters have amongst themselves is, am I charging enough? Or how can I charge more? Because I'm getting $10,000, let's say, for a book, and it took me 9 months. And, how do I get that number up? And are people willing to pay that? I think that's probably the biggest, people aren't going to be willing to pay that, is the assumption that a lot of ghostwriters make, whatever the number is. I charge 25, nobody's going to pay 30. I charge 50, nobody's going to pay 60. And what I heard was there are people who are going to be willing to pay that, whatever the number. There are people paying 200,000. Yeah. So it's just, I think, how you position yourself and the network that you plug into. Because if most aspiring authors are turning to their colleagues in their circles and saying, hey, who's the ghostwriter you used? Or do you know of any ghostwriters you can recommend? You want to make sure that your name is the one that they share, because then they're sold.
And I think that word of mouth is the most powerful form of marketing. I mean, because if you think about even in your everyday life, right? Like you go to a restaurant that you really love and you're going to talk about it, right? You're not going to make a commercial about it. You're going to talk about it. And then somebody else is going to go, they're going to tell people, and that's how it spreads. I mean, that's just what marketing 101 is, how that works. Word of mouth is so important, which means that if you are in those positions and you are starting a business or running a business, and I'm talking to self-published authors too, like you need a network of people, right? You have to build that community, because that's where that information is going to spread the fastest, is by word of mouth to the next person, to the next person. And then it becomes exponential. So yeah, you do have to plug into a community and into a network. And then to your point about the charging, I mean, even as an independent author who writes fiction books, I get a friends and family discount for my editor, but I still pay upwards of 3,000, 3,500
Yeah.
just for editing, right?
Yeah.
She's just doing copy edits. That doesn't
Right.
include developmental. I can't imagine what she would try to charge me, even as my sister, if I asked her to do research and what have you, like if she
Right.
was going to spend all that kind of time and effort. So yeah, like don't undervalue your work, because clearly it's something that's needed, because you're playing the role of researcher and almost
Right.
counselor and
Mhm.
editor and
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes you're a therapist. I mean, I
yeah.
find sometimes that conversations will veer into the personal.
Hmm.
And I've had many clients say, oh, I feel like I'm at my therapist, but hey, we're having breakthroughs. So this is good. Because as the ghostwriter, you're constantly asking, well, why? Why did you do that? And how did you feel about that? And how do you think they felt about that? So there are lots of roles that we play.
Yes. You change your hat like multiple times a day just to be like, okay, now we're going to look at this part of things. So yeah,
Right.
your time is worth money, like it is, because
Yeah.
especially if you're doing one project at a time, which I don't know how
Right.
that works. I know for me, I have multiple projects all the time.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if you can do multiple projects and wear that many hats, but like don't undercharge, especially if all you can do is one project at a time. I can't imagine that being beneficial.
And some ghostwriters, there's sort of two camps. There are some ghostwriters who work on one book at a time. It's their sole
Hmm.
focus, and for whatever time frame, that's the only book they're working on, and that's great.
Hmm.
I am. I have so many interests that I need to have multiple things going
Yep.
on. Not a ton, but even when I'm writing books, I might also be writing articles
Hmm.
because I have so many interests.
Yeah.
There's a limit to how many books I can work on at one time. And what I've heard from colleagues is they are like me, and that they try and space out the stage at which the book is. So
Yeah.
I didn't say that grammatically correctly, but if
No,
I have
it makes sense to me though.
so if I have, say, 3 books, I might have one where we're just getting started. So we're working on the outline. We're trying to figure out what makes the most sense in terms of how the information is going to be structured. What are the titles of the chapters? How many chapters are there? So there are those conversations in that book. And then you might have one where you're in the middle of writing it. Every week you're having a call or a Zoom meeting to gather all the information that you need, and then you're drafting it. And that's almost the hardest piece. But then you could also have potentially a third one where you're editing. You've turned in the draft, you've had conversations about what needs to be moved or stories that need to be added, and you're polishing it essentially. So it's not requiring as much cerebral work because you're reacting to stuff that's already on the page. So I know, as I said, a lot of my colleagues will have 2, maybe 3 books at the same time, as long as they are at different stages. As I say that, of course, I have to acknowledge that things don't always go to plan. So
Right.
sometimes, you will think, I've scheduled this so well, pat myself on the back. And then a client takes on a new role and they're going to be traveling for 6 months. So you have to shelf that. But do you really have the time to take on a new book because you're already starting this other book? And then it's just a matter of how well can you juggle.
Hmm. Well, and especially if you're trying to channel someone else's voice, how many
Right.
voices do you want in your head? Because I can imagine, like
Right.
for me, that gets confusing even with my fictional characters. I'm going, hold on, wait. Wait, what
Right.
did you sound like? Let me go back and read the last chapter to figure it
Right.
out. Yeah.
Right. And that's why it's often helpful just to have one where you're in the
Hmm.
writing phase, so that if you're getting into someone's head, you really just have one. And the ones at the beginning and at the end it's not the same type of work.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So, all right, so that's kind of how things are becoming more mainstream. People are actually talking about it, which I
Yeah.
think a lot of times before now there was a stigma, maybe some taboo, like
Yes.
it's a ghost, because you brought up ethics and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with it. I'm thinking, if I was a celebrity constantly having to perform, I wouldn't have time to sit down and write a
Right.
book. Obviously, I'd be in demand all the time. So somebody else would
Right.
have to write it. And so I'm thinking, yeah, that it is becoming a lot more common to talk
Yeah.
about ghostwriters and that kind of thing. But what are some of the common misconceptions that you would like to dispel, that to assure people it's not a
Yeah.
bad thing?
Well, let me just sort of build on your point, and I completely agree with you that we're talking more about ghostwriting because the celebrities, the actors, the athletes, who previously hired ghostwriters are now admitting, of course I had help. Like, I don't know anything about publishing.
Yeah.
Whereas 20 years ago, you sort of knew that, of course, this person, they didn't have time. They probably didn't have the interest to sit down and slave away for months on a book if they were touring in their band or whatever. But it was sort of hush hush.
Yes.
And now people are, the celebrities and athletes and leaders are becoming much more comfortable with it. There is much less shame and stigma attached to writing a ghostwriter. And I think and I hope that's because people are getting a better understanding of how a ghostwriter works.
Yes.
So in the past, and I think this is one of those misconceptions, people think that a ghostwriter is someone who does everything, all of the thinking associated with a book, so that all the client needs to do, this is the misconception. The client says, hey, I want to write a book about lawn care. Like, go do that. And then I think people think that the ghostwriter then goes and does all the research and writes the book and polishes it and then hands it back to the client. Okay, here's your book with the client's name on it. That's really not how ghostwriting works in the nonfiction side. I think on the fiction side, what I've heard is that you might get sort of a story description and character descriptions, and you can run with it. On the nonfiction side, when you're an expert, you're the foremost authority in your field, or you're the CEO of a company or a founder of a company, you know more about that topic than anyone. There is no way that any writer is going to be able to write your book for you without your involvement. So I think that's where I'm increasingly using the term writing partner when I talk to people about what exactly a ghostwriter does, because a ghostwriter cannot write a nonfiction book without the client's involvement. So yes, the ghostwriter's name probably won't appear on the cover, but we're seeing more with and. So if you have, Marcia Layton Turner with Joe Smith, that means that Joe Smith is a collaborator almost. They provided an equal, they are equally involved. Oh no, you know what? I switched it. So and is the collaborator, sorry. And the with is they helped produce the book. And is the partner, is the other expert. So you could even have and then a with. So Joe and Jane with Marcia, right? The two experts with Marcia. Marcia helped with the writing.
Okay.
But we're seeing more of the cover credit coming out, whereas 20 years ago, no, everybody's really quiet about that. You might see in the acknowledgments a person's name. Hey, thanks to Marcia for really helping to pull this whole thing together. Okay, well, that's code for Marcia was the ghostwriter. But anyway, so that's misconception is the ghostwriter is doing everything and the author is sitting back and doing nothing. And that's not the case. And that is problematic sometimes when I'm talking to clients who have that thought that, oh, I'm just going to hand it off and then I can go on vacation and you're going to write my book. And no, you do need to put time in. Now, granted, it's a lot less time than if you were writing it yourself. We might have a couple-hour call to talk through a chapter, and then you can go back to your day job, and I'm going to then spend hours and hours drafting the chapter. So it does save a lot of time, but you still need to be around, and you need to provide feedback when it's needed. So I think that's the biggest misperception, is just how that works. Another misperception has to do with fees. I get a lot of proposals from authors saying, hey, well, let's work together and we'll split the royalties on the back end. Okay. That doesn't work. So, and I try and explain that ghostwriters are a lot like accountants or attorneys, and we're going to be providing a service and we need to be paid as the service is provided based on milestones that we achieve, chapters that we deliver, things like that. When someone asks to split the royalties, I just hear split $0, because the reality of nonfiction publishing is most authors, I think the number is now, they sell on average 250 copies. So when you get a deal with a traditional publisher, you might get an advance, and what authors need to understand, it's an advance against royalties. It's not free money. It's a
Right.
credit. You're being paid in advance for a small number of books that the publisher expects you to sell. So it might be $5,000 if they think you can sell maybe 5,000 books. It's not a huge amount of money, but you're not going to get a royalty payment then until that advance is earned out.
Yep.
So you need to sell 5,000 copies before you start getting checks that are semi-annual. So most books never earn out their advance. So when a client comes to me and says, Marcia, hey, let's work together. This book is going to be a blockbuster. No, I don't have a social media following. No, I don't have an email list. And no, I don't speak. But this idea is amazing and it's going to sell 1 million copies.
I love your
then
confidence.
like, it's really interesting.
Right.
You know, the book idea could be fantastic.
Yeah.
And maybe they've stumbled on this incredible new marketing method that they have proven works. That's great. But if nobody knows about you already and your book is going to be the first time they hear about you, I'm not sure they're going to be convinced to spend $25, $30 on a book if they've never heard of you.
Yep.
Which is just a long way of saying most ghostwriters are not going to go for the royalty split because they know these numbers. They know that you're unlikely to ever earn a royalty check. So they're going to do months of work. You're asking author, you're asking the ghostwriters to do months of work without any kind of payment. And then on the back end, they're not going to get anything.
Yeah.
Or even if you do earn out your advance, every 6 months, they might get a portion of that check.
Maybe.
You know, you get $1,000 royalty check. They're going to get 500 of that 6 months down the line, a year down the line. And it's just not fair, really.
No, it's not.
But I think people don't understand what they're asking. They think this is $1 million idea and I'm being generous. And I understand that. So I feel bad when I have to explain the realities of it. And some people don't believe me. They believe that their book is the exception. And that's generally not the case. So then what I try and suggest is you may have an amazing idea. So what I would suggest first, before you go to the book, is start blogging. Set up a social media account. Start building that following so that people know your name, know what you're about. And then your book is sort of it makes sense. It's the next step, the logical next step in learning more about your concept. But you don't want it to be the first time somebody hears of your name because they're probably not going to buy the book.
Oh, no, you're exactly right. That's exactly how it works in our world too. You know, when it comes to trying to put a self-published novel into the universe, I mean, there are so many, right? You know, you're looking at Amazon has kind of taken over that whole, environment. And so there are so many books every single day going out. And so if nobody has ever heard of you before, boop, they just go scroll right by. Like, that's it. No more. Sorry.
Right.
Oh, yeah. So I had a question while you were talking about that. I was thinking, I also want to know, how has AI played into the ghostwriting? Like, has it had an impact on the ghostwriting world? Because I know it's having one on our side of things as well.
It's so funny you asked that because a couple days ago, I had reached out to someone, a leader in their field, and they didn't have a book. And I thought, they'd be somebody I'd like to work with. And side note, I'm trying to be more intentional this year about who I work with instead of waiting for somebody to come to me, to think about
great.
who is interesting to me and who would I want to work with. So I've been reaching out, and this person responded and said, I've been thinking about a book, but I think I might just use AI. Isn't AI making it easier? And I had to say, no. Well, yes and no. Right. AI is good for a lot of things, and writing a book is not one of them. And I said, the biggest problem you're going to have if you try and use AI to write your book, because it's kind of sounded like what they were planning to do, is you're not going to be able to copyright it. So what's the point of doing all that work when that book is not going to be your property? Library of Congress will not copyright it. It's likely going to include material that's been plagiarized. So you're opening yourself up to lawsuits by doing this. And it's going to be hard to tell where some of the material has been taken. During my doctoral work, one of my colleagues used AI. This was a couple of years ago. We had already done our lit review, and they were going back to see, has anything been published in the last year that I should weave into my final version? And so they went to ChatGPT and they did a search in their topic, and they got a list of 8 new studies. I thought, oh my goodness, this is perfect. These are amazing, right on target. I'm so excited. And as I clicked through, you can probably guess where this is going. None of those existed. They were made up. The hallucination of AI. So they quickly learned that, but that concerns me, knowing that that can happen. Authors who are using AI, you may not know, if someone is quoted having said this about your topic. Well, you're going to have to do some research to see, does that person exist? Did they really say it? And in that context. And when you have to double check every statement or fact or statistic or story, just write your own.
Seriously. Oof. Yeah, I've seen that a lot too. And I actually picked up a book. It was probably at the beginning of the year. I picked up a book and I started reading it, and I thought, because I love ChatGPT, don't get me wrong, that sucker
Right.
is fantastic tool, not a book
Yes.
writer, but it is such a good tool.
Right.
But I picked it up and I started reading this book, and I thought, that is a GPT phrase if I've ever heard one. That's also one, like, because there are words, there are phrases that it loves to
Yeah.
use and throw out there, and I thought, this is interesting. I didn't finish the book. It was so badly put together because I thought, I could have done better. Just give me an idea. I could have run with it. They could have hired me to be their ghostwriter, but they
Right.
didn't, because that's not a thing. But not for me. It's not a thing. I get lost in my own imagination too much. But as fun as
Right.
it sounds, like I really am going, oh, I could totally do this, and then I'm like, but no, I want it to be mine. I love my stories. But anyway, I digress. But yeah, just you can tell when something is written by a computer and when it's written by a person.
Yeah. So I agree with you there. I've used ChatGPT to come up with, when I've written articles, to come up with ideas
Yes,
for
yes.
subheads or for headers.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't mean I'm going to use them necessarily, but what are some other ways to express something? I use it sometimes to come up with ideas for structuring. I'm putting
Yes.
together some programs. I'm not asking it to write anything. I'm just asking for help in structuring something that
Yes.
I'm working on. I never use it for client work on anything
Yeah.
because I just feel like they're hiring me, the
Mm-hmm.
human. But it is useful as a tool
Yep.
to kind of give you, I sort of see it as feedback.
Mm-hmm.
Here's what I'm thinking.
Yes.
Does this make sense, ChatGPT? But
Mm-hmm.
I don't use it for generation.
Yeah.
And but I think you're right. People are assuming that they're going to be using it for generating new content, and it is very problematic.
It is. It's risky, and that is not something I would ever like. Why would you put the work that you want somebody to love? Why would you put that at
Right.
risk? That's
Right.
I can't imagine.
Right.
No, it's pretty scary. So where do you see the future of ghostwriting kind of heading? Like considering all
Hmm.
the current trends and that kind of thing.
I think there's going to be a shakeout. I think
Mm,
right now we're seeing so many writing outlets drying up, unfortunately.
yeah.
Newspapers are shutting down, magazines are shutting down, or they're going digital. So the opportunities are shrinking, and writers are seeing ghostwriting as potentially lucrative because it is. It is well paying
Yep.
because there is a lot of work involved. So now we're seeing the number of ghostwriters increasing dramatically, which is great because there is work. But I think at some point people are going to see that, well, it isn't exactly what I thought it was going to be. It's not as easy as I thought it was going to be, because you still have to get the work.
Yep.
I mean, there's, as a business owner, you have to find the clients,
Mm-hmm.
get the work, and then do the work. And I'm not sure that all writers realize that this is a business.
Mm-hmm.
It's a different way of thinking about things. So I think over time, maybe over the next 5 to 10 years, I think we're going to see ghostwriting as an industry consolidate. I think there will be some prominent ghostwriters. There are major agencies right now. I think that they will continue to grow. I'm hoping that the scammers, because they are also increasing in
Man.
numbers, I'm hoping that they will get shut down. but the demand for content is going to continue, and I think will
Yeah.
continue to grow. AI is going to have an impact, but I don't think it's going to have as big an impact on the type of writing that requires any kind of emotion, whether
Yes.
that's fiction writing or whether it's nonfiction
Mhm.
writing. When you need thoughts and feelings as part of the experience, the reader experience, I don't think AI can do that. It may be able to eventually, but I think the quality writing is still going to exist. I think maybe the short form, quickie fill in blog posts and stuff like that, that may be taken over by AI.
Oh yeah.
But I think the higher level that requires a human brain, I think that will still be around. I think the opportunity will still be there. And because it's sort of the cream rising to the top, I think the pricing, the fees will still be there. I think they'll still be pretty high as people recognize the amount of work that goes into it.
It is definitely a big job. Like just, thinking about what I do and what I delegate to other people. Like you do so much of the work that I send to other people. I'm like, nope, that's on you. You help me do
Yeah.
that. Like my editors and beta readers and ARC readers and all of these people. And you're doing all of this work. And so yeah, no, I think the business will always be there. And I love what you said about, because it translates over to even in self-publishing, it's a business. Once you
Yeah.
start putting, selling something, it becomes a business, and like
Right.
you have to treat it like a business.
Yeah.
Otherwise, like you're probably going to break some rules, but you're also going to miss out on a lot of profits in the end too.
It's also harder to separate between business and personal life. If
Oof.
you see yourself as a writer, as an artiste, as we like to call it, and you are writing because you're passionate about writing and about expression, and you're working whenever the spirit moves you, and maybe then as a ghostwriter, you're working with clients and you want to be available to them whenever they want to work. So you're working nights and weekends. That's not healthy. And that's not a
Yeah.
business. We talk a lot in the Association of Ghostwriters about boundaries. You have to set
Yes.
boundaries for yourself and for your clients.
Hmm.
You work these hours, whatever they are. And maybe, you have young kids at home. And so
Hmm.
therefore you're working in the middle of the day and you're working at night. Great, whatever it is. But figure out how you want your business to run, what your policies are, explain those to your clients, and then hold firm, because you're running a business. This is not
Yes.
a charity that
Hmm.
exists to help people out whenever they need it. No, this is your business.
Yes, exactly. No, and there's nothing wrong. No is a full sentence. That is one of
Yep.
those things that I repeat regularly. I'm like, boundaries are important. And that's true for whether, if your creativity is cover designing, ghostwriting,
Right.
authoring, whatever the case may be. Like, I don't care if your editor emails you at midnight and says, hey, you need to fix this. No, you can reach me at 7 a.m. when I'm sitting down at my office desk,
Right.
like we'll get there. Granted, she's my sister, so I might answer if she calls me at midnight, but that's for other reasons.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
But I think that's a really good point. When clients email you, just as one
Hmm.
example, if they email you at 9 o'clock at night, well, you might see it. That doesn't mean you open it, and it
That's
doesn't mean you respond
right.
to it because you're not at work. If
Hmm.
you work, I generally work like 10 to 6,
Hmm.
maybe 10 to 7. Um, but otherwise, I'm not going to respond to that because
Yeah,
I'm not working then. And you
that's
don't
right.
have to either. And if people expect you to respond within an hour when they email you at midnight, well, then you need to set some boundaries, or maybe they need to find somebody else to work with.
Oh, for sure. And you know what? If you're going to have, you can have a contract, and when you have a contract, you put it in there. These are the
Yeah.
hours between which I will respond, because
Yeah.
anything else is a no thank you.
Right. Right. Setting expectations right up front. I think that's
Yes.
another good point. Say, here's how I work. And as we're talking in the beginning about whether I'm a good fit for you, it goes both ways. I have to
Hmm.
decide if I want to work with you. When I
Yeah.
say, here's my
Ooh.
process, here's when I work, if they say, oh, well, I want 2 hour response. Ooh, well, no, I'm not an employee. I,
Yes.
I'm not on your payroll. This is how my business works.
Hmm.
Is that going to work for you? Well, then they can decide.
I love it. I love that. No, and that's hard for some of us who
Yeah.
are reformed people pleasers,
Yeah.
and we're learning and pushing through those things. But yeah, no, my life and mental health and well-being they've ever since I've realized that oh, I don't have to say yes. Oh, there's freedom in that.
Right.
So much freedom in that.
And
Oh my
and
goodness.
And I will say, and when thinking about whether you want to work with a client or if you're already working with a client, like really pay attention to your gut. If you get an email
Oh.
and your stomach clenches and you're so afraid to open it, well, that's not a healthy business
Mm-mm.
relationship to have. And you may want to see if you can reframe it, or maybe if you can refer them to somebody else. Because I mean, ghostwriting, writing fiction, writing books, whatever
Mhm.
you're doing, all creative activities, there needs to be some joy in there. You
Yes.
really need to enjoy what you're doing. And if there's some aspect that doesn't feel right, well, I think it's healthy to explore that and say, okay, how can I get rid of that so that I'm having more joy on a daily basis?
Yes. Yes. That should always be our main goal. I think in
Yeah,
life, just in general, like joy, reach for the joy. And
yeah,
if it's not there, maybe reevaluate.
right. And that opportunity, that client, hey, that might spark joy for somebody else.
There you go. Exactly. And that, yes, you do not have to accept every request that comes over your
Right.
desk or email or anything. Oh my goodness. Yes. I could get fired up. This is one of those passionate topics for me that I'm just like, because I know how freeing it is, how just lovely and joyful it is to be able to say no, that's
Right.
not for me, or just to lessen the expectations of myself sometimes that, I think, oh, I've got to constantly be churning something out. You can't. You you physically and mentally
Right.
can't always be on, and so it's okay to turn it off sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Ooh, you have to. Oh my goodness, Marcia, we're almost to an hour, if you can believe it. Like this has gone by so fast, it's not even funny. And I've got two more questions, so I would like
Yeah.
for you to tell listeners, how can we connect with you and your work?
Well, I have a website. It's my name, marcialaytonturner.com, where you can learn about me, can read all the blog posts that I share, that I try and stay focused on topics that are going to be of interest to potential authors, sort of educating them about publishing in general, and then about working with a ghostwriter, whether it's me or not. Sort of here's what it looks like. So that's on my website. LinkedIn, would love to connect with people on LinkedIn. I'm trying to always grow my following and my network there. And if anybody's thinking about becoming a ghostwriter or wants to explore that, the Association of ghostwriters.org is a place where writers can connect. And we also have a blog there about being a ghostwriter and doing the ghostwriting work that I think might be useful.
Yeah, and that's fiction and nonfiction ghostwriters.
It is, yeah. We tend to lean towards nonfiction because that's where a lot of the leads
Oh yeah.
come from that are nonfiction. But we do have some fiction, and there are certainly fiction ghostwriters in the AOG. Yeah.
Excellent. All right. And then I have one last very big question for you, and it is one that nobody's ever gotten wrong. So I have faith it's going to go well. Are you ready?
Uh-oh.
She's like, let me sign off real quick.
Oh
She's like,
no.
no, it's really it's a question that I
Okay.
think you've already offered up so much, but I'm going to ask
Yeah.
it anyway. All right, here we go. What is one piece of advice or encouragement you want listeners to walk away with if they hear nothing else?
There is plenty of ghostwriting work out there if you're interested in becoming a ghostwriter. And I think the key, because I've talked a lot about how ghostwriting has grown so much and how in the future there may be consolidation. I could be wrong about that. But I think the key is going to be picking a specialty that you love, that you're going to be interested in studying and learning about, and really becoming the expert in whatever that is. So I think, yeah, that will be the key. But there
Yeah.
is work.
And that's important to know because a lot of times you do think, oh, yeah, no, where am I going to fit into that picture, right? Like,
Right,
where is there even going to be room for me? No, if
right,
you, because not everybody, I could sit and I could probably ghostwrite for wedding planners. I could ghostwrite for marriage and family counselors. I could ghostwrite for a number of things, but don't ask me to ghostwrite for business startups. Like, that is not where you want me. You know what I mean? Like,
right, right. And
yeah.
right now, there are a lot of ghostwriters who are serving the business community.
Hmm.
If you wanted to come in and you specialize maybe in a certain local area and you only work with businesses or people or organizations in a local area, like that can be one specialty. I know there's a lot of interest right now in logistics, how products get from place to place. You could specialize in logistics. You could specialize in a particular medical condition that people, where there's a lot of funding going towards, for example. There are a lot of different ways. Just be aware that if you come into ghostwriting, being a generalist, you think that it opens up as many opportunities as possible. I don't think that's where the industry is going. I think that experts like to work with experts. And so you'll need to drill down and figure out which one I want to be associated with for, the next 10 years of my career. But big messages. There is work out there.
I love it. Marcia, thanks so much for sitting down and hanging out and just having this conversation. Like, it's been a joy just talking to you, but at the same time, learning from you, that's in a whole world that I did not really understand. And now I feel pretty good about it. And I'm like,
oh, good.
My ADHD brain is like, I could do this. But then it's like, Jennifer, seriously, you just started another book. Stop.
And sometimes I think, fiction, I love reading fiction. Maybe I should try fiction. Then I think, that's not the best use of my time. It would take me 20 years to figure out how to think the way that you already know how to think. So, yeah.
How about, you want to read a good book? I'll send you one. And you want to ghostwrite? I'll send you somebody who needs a ghostwriter. We'll just trade. It's fine. It's great.
Well, and that's, another, we didn't talk about this at all, but one of the best sources of work for me is fellow writers. Yeah. I get more referrals from fellow writers who say, Marcia, I know that this is what you do. Let me send you this person. And I think that writers generally don't think of other writers as sources of work. They think of them sometimes as competitors. And I think that's something that we all probably should try and get over, because we're friends, we're all creatives, we're doing some of the same things, and we're not competing.
Oh, that is so true across the board. It doesn't matter if you are writing fiction, nonfiction, ghostwriting, any of that. Like that is the mindset. Yes, we are not competition. Let's help each other. So, all right. Well, I hope you have a great rest of your day, and let's have another conversation sometime. That would be great.
Would love it.
Yes.